This is under the driver's side wheel well. I have the rear end out for a different project, but the fuel line on these Saturns rusts out up in this area. I replaced this before. I have, you can maybe see the connectors there. So I replaced it with a hard line and flared fittings. I tried to bend the line to be the same as the one that came out, which was not easy, and then it's almost impossible to thread it in there. So the right way to fix it is with a hose, which I didn't have at the time. So with the rear end out anyway, I decided to clean this up, and I cut off those lines. They're pretty well fitting up until this area, and then when they connect to the fuel filter that's supposed to go where that hole is all rusted out into the frame up there, and it goes to the evap canister. So I'm going to replace those from where I cut those steel lines off. I'm going to replace those with plastic or nylon fuel line, and I went through a lot of digging around trying to find the connectors, but I finally found them, and I'll show those. As far as this hole rusted out where the fuel filter is supposed to go, I drilled a hole up in there where I can mount it on the side and get it in approximately the same position. So I'm going to do that. Here's the part of the line that came out that I had replaced, and it switches to nylon on the end here. But I tried to put that connector back on, or the hose back on, and I just had no luck. It turns out I should have used a union, but I didn't know at the time. So anyway, I'm going to clean that up. And here's the method for drilling that hole in the side. I cut a 1/4-inch drill bit off short and put it in this right angle drill, and I was able to drill a hole to hopefully mount that fuel filter bracket, which is here. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, I don't think this camera focuses very well, but these are the unions for nylon to steel, and they're like $5 for 3 of them, and it's Dorman part number 800-135, and then I picked up some nylon fuel line. It was hard to find this in stock. I needed 5/16 for the evap canister, and I already spliced in this connector for the evap canister, and there's my splice. So I used a hot air gun at about 140 degrees C, warmed up the nylon, and I was able to shove that ribbed connector in there. I think you can see the ribs in the nylon. I wanted to replace it, but this is a goofy connector on the evap. It goes from what's normally a 3/8-inch line on the connector, and the output there, where you can see the spline, is 5/16. So it's easy to buy 3/8 to 3/8, 3/8 connector to a 3/8-inch kind of hose barb, but finding a 3/8 to 5/16 hose barb is tough. And I also tried to find, reducers, and trying to find anything in stock is really hard. So I ended up reusing that stub of the connector that was originally on the car, and then that's going to go to that steel line via one of these unions. And I'm also replacing the fuel line, of course. Here's the stub from before. I think I'm going to use that again, actually. So it goes into the fuel filter here, and then I flared a nut on that end. So I'm going to cut that nut off and then splice with one of these, a 3/8 this time, to the 3/8 nylon, which I have a piece around somewhere, and then that'll go to the ends you saw cut off. And there's the new fuel filter while I'm at it. So here's the setup. This is the stub. I cut the flare off. This is the what do they call it? Nylon to steel connector assortment. This is the 3/8, the nut, the compression fitting, the main fitting here, the nylon compression washer or whatever for the nylon hose, and the nut for that. So you don't want to mix things up here. And this guy is beveled, and the bevel goes in first. So the bevel goes to this side. I'm going to put that together with this hose and see how it works. A quick shot of how it's going together. Okay, just to put a wrench on here, I need to take this plastic clip off. And this is actually how you take the line out of the fuel filter. Sometimes it's hard to do this when you really don't know what's going on. They give you these things you're supposed to push in and don't know where to pull, etc. But so if you push this in like that, then this clip, you can't do it with one hand, but this you just push the hose out. So anyway, it's digging in two little ears in here, and this clip pushes those ears out, so that the white plastic here, if I could do it with one hand, will come out. Let's see. There it goes. So that's all it does. Okay, this side went together fine. It's, when I put that ferrule on, it was a little loose. I was worried maybe this was a metric size tube or something, but it did tighten up nicely, so I think that's okay. Now I'm putting the nut on the nylon. This nut, it's really pretty tough to get it onto that tube. You have to turn it and push pretty hard, so then that'll go into the ferrule or whatever it is, washer, and then onto here. Okay, this washer deal is not easy to get on there. I think part of the problem is when you put this nut on, it's so tight that you kind of burr the edge, so I cut the hose off a little bit after I put this nut on, and then I had to put some WD-40 on there and fight around, but I finally got that thing to slide on. Okay, I got a bolt through the hole I drilled, and I got the fuel filter just loosely in there. I wish I had removed it a little further outboard. It's close to the fuel tank line, but I think I can bend that bracket a little bit, and the fuel tank rubber line there moves down quite easy, so might actually help hold the thing in once that new mount rusts out. Alright, that was a little too tight, so now I got a new hole right behind the shadow. Okay, ready to put the connector on, the splice connector on the other side. I hopefully have this cut to the right length. The thing you want to do here is plan where you put this thing on, because at least in my case, this goes on so hard. I don't know if I could do it under the car and up in the cavity that's up there, so I think it's good to put that plastic side all together and then put it up and work on the compression fitting on the metal line. Okay, I think that turned out pretty nice. There's the hard line I had replaced before. This is up under the rear axle. There's the evap canister. And I ran it over here, spliced it into my fuel filter stub, and got the fuel filter remounted here and back together. So pretty happy with that, I guess. Now I have to get the evap line, which is up there, over to this spigot on the on the canister. Okay, I can't get the compression ring on that pipe because there's a very slight bend in it right where I cut it, unfortunately. And of course I already cut this guy to the proper length, so shortening that steel cable means I have to lengthen this one. So I'm going to cut this apart at the connector. I carefully whittle it down and get that off, and then I can put a longer piece on here. Okay, I got that cut back and the ferrule on, and I didn't forget to put the nut on like I usually do. It was still pretty hard to get on. I had to file off, I guess, a burr on the edge from cutting the tube. Okay, I put a new piece on here, which was no fun. And now on this 5/16 tube, these guys are very loose. So I don't know what's going on. On the 3/8 tube, they were really super tight. And on this one, they're loose. As far as the metal tubing, the ferrule was tight on the 3/8 tubing I put in, but loose on the 3/8 tubing that goes into the fuel filter. So I don't know, maybe that was metric. Now I'm worried it's going to leak, but I'll put it together and turn the ignition on, let the fuel pump run, and see what happens. Okay, I don't know if it's going to work, but at least it looks pretty. I'm gonna fire up the ignition, let the fuel pump run, and see if I get showered with gas. This is the nylon line I used from Napa, 730-5613.